Okay, 1982. That's the highest rated we've faced by far. Let's see. Let's go d4. Let's go very positional against this guy. Oh, and an Englund. Okay. So a lot of people, I think, want to know how to play against this. So let me try to prove my, put my mouth where my money is. My money where my mouth is. Oh my god, I'm tired. Okay, so we obviously accept it. And we defend the pawn with knight f3. And now there are two main moves. Yeah, so queen e7 is the tricky move. And the Englund is one of those openings where there is a quote-unquote trap, but the best line is precisely to fall into the trap. And does anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so queen e7 counterattacks the pawn. And the quote-unquote trap is to go either bishop f4 or bishop g5, and both of those moves essentially transpose into the same overall line, so you can play bishop f4 anyway. Now, the reason that this is considered to be quote-unquote falling into the trap is because it allows queen b4 check, forking the king and the bishop. However, after queen b4 check, we can return with the bishop and block on d2, but it appears that black simply takes the pawn on b2. And it seems that we're in huge trouble. The rook on a1 is hanging, black's won the pawn back. I mean, how bad could it get? And yet, if you know this line well, if you know the theory, you will realize that the fact that black is so underdeveloped and that the queen is deep in white's grill so early in the game is not a good thing for black. And it turns out that, in fact, black is almost losing in the main line. Bishop d2. Queen takes b2, attacking the rook. Now, the actual trap is that the very tempting move is bishop c3. You think, oh, let me attack the queen and x-ray defend the rook. But bishop c3 is wrong on account of what move? Bishop c3 is a big mistake on account of bishop b4. Bishop swoops in, pinning white's bishop to the king. And that creates very problematic consequences for white. Therefore, you got to play knight c3. That is correct. Thank you, Yartran. Bishop b4. And now, what is the key continuation? And Aman, and I think the chess bras have analyzed this. This is a very famous queen sacrifice line. You go rook b1, and black plays queen takes c3. No, queen a3. Okay, queen a3 is not challenging. Queen takes c3 is the way that I think Aman recommended this, and I will show you guys afterward how to get a big advantage in that line. Now, queen a3, as far as I remember, is just very, very bad for several different reasons. To my understanding, I think knight d5 is an excellent move here. Immediately going after the c7 pawn. You basically don't want to dilly-dally. I will check this after the game, guys, just to make sure I'm not lying to you. But as far as I remember, knight d5 is the move here. Offering the trade of bishops, then you just play queen takes d2, and that threat against the c7 pawn is absolutely devastating. Look at how underdeveloped black is. You just can't get away with this kind of stuff in chess. If you go knight d5, well, if he goes queen a5, we just take the bishop. The bishop is attacked 1, 2, 3 times and only defended twice. Oh my god, he did it. Who's the prophet here? I'm supposed to be the prophet. You're stealing my thunder, my man. Okay, so he's blundered a piece. We can play bishop takes b4 or knight takes b4. Which way do you guys think we should take? You gotta be careful. You have to be creative. One of these moves is a pretty big mistake. Yeah, we should definitely take with a knight. The problem is that if you take with a bishop, after knight takes b4, do you guys see how the queen is going to be pinning whatever piece appears on b4? And that's going to be an issue because black will be able to play c5 after that and pick that piece off. So knight takes b4 is crucial. Taking it with the rook would be bad because that d5 knight was also hanging by the queen. Okay, so takes. Now I'd like to take with the bishop to prevent him from castling. And now how do we continue in this position? Again, very often players get over creative or too fancy. You don't need to do either. You simply need to follow the rules of development. You need to complete the development, which means we need to get this bishop out. To get the bishop out, we need to bring the pawn out to e4. Thank you for being generous, stingy Californian. Appreciate it. Yeah, so he's probably going to go a5. I guess it would be he's going to go a5. He's going to try to dislodge the bishop from this diagonal, which would be completely understandable. Knight h6. Okay, so instead he develops his knight. Now we have a couple of different approaches here. We can also try to trap his queen, which would be quite an interesting way to try to win the game fast. I mean, the simplest move here is just to play a bishop d3, a bishop b2, just develop the bishop and castle. But if we want to go after his queen, if we want to play clinically, we need to figure out where the queen's escape routes lie. And really, there is only one crucial escape route to cover, right? And that is queen e6. All other squares in black side of the board are covered, either by the bishop, which is covering the dark squares, or by, you know, the rook, or by this bishop. So how should we prevent queen e6 without ruining our position? Can we control the e6 square by one of our pieces? Yeah, so c4 would be an understandable idea, but remember that c4 blocks the bishop's coverage of a6. So c4 covers one of the escape routes, but opens up another. Okay, so some of you guys are thinking about knight g5, but generally speaking, I want to orient my pieces toward the center. I don't necessarily want to put a knight on the side of the board just to cover e6. So I prefer the move knight d4. Of course, I saw knight g5. I just didn't like it. No, I saw knight g5. Both moves are approximately equivalent, but I like my knight to be toward the center here. Maybe it'll go to b5. And you can do other stuff with this knight, not just trap the queen. Okay. So what now? Again, now there's a million different ways to win. I think if we want to stick to the original idea of trapping the queen, we should already first check the move rook a1. So who can tell me this? Does rook a1 trap the queen? Should we go rook a1? No, because queen b2 happens. So at this point, b2 is literally the only escape square for the queen. So we need to think very methodically. Can we cover the b2 square with another one of our pieces so that after we play rook a1, the queen is going to be trapped? As soon as you ask yourself the question that way, the move queen c1 comes to mind. But if you didn't ask yourself that question, it would be hard to generate this move out of the blue if you didn't know what you were looking for. And so that's why I'm such a big believer at this higher level of asking yourself the right questions. We don't care about c5 because we still are going to go rook a1. Now bishop c3 commits the same mistake that c4 would have in this position. You are indeed covering one of the squares, but you are opening up another. Trapping the queen is generally a very delicate mechanism. There's a lot of squares that you have to cover. A lot of pieces are involved. So you got to make sure that when you're covering one square or a set of squares, you're not also opening up another escape route. And that's exactly what bishop c3 is guilty of, because after bishop c3, he can go queen a3 and try to escape via this diagonal. And that wouldn't be a big deal. One piece of advice is if you're up a queen in a position like this, don't lose on time trying to trap his queen. If you don't trap his queen, that's not a big deal. You're up a piece. So you need to manage your time well. Queen a4, he's trying to escape, but notice how the queen has literally no prospects here. We have a very simple move, sending the queen back. As many of you guys are indicating, it is bishop to b5. Yes. Queen a2, and then rook a1 traps the queen. Simple. And notice how many pieces, all hands on deck effort. How many pieces are involved? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how many pieces are required in order to trap a man's queen. He resigns. But of course, after queen a2, rook a1, the queen is trapped. $10 from Dual Fizz. Thank you. I've discovered your stream recently, and I really enjoy this educational part of it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to hear that. All right. So I have a file here. So let me just quickly open up my chess space file. Thank you, Gigahertz, for the 7 months. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So let me see. Just 1 second. Yeah, just give me a hot second, guys. Okay, so let's talk about the Englund. Now, if you want to play the Englund, I think, relatively speaking, probably it's a better idea to play it with d6. this is one of the ways to play the Englund. The Englund is a very bad opening. Even compared to other gambits, it's just not good. If white knows what to do, black's position is in crisis. I mean, it's just very, very bad. And after d6, e takes d6 is okay for black. I mean, black can try to play this. But white has the very strong sort of intermediate move, bishop to g5 here. And the point of this move is that if black covers with the bishop, then you're able to trade the bishops. Now notice how the d6 pawn has been softened up, and you can simply play e takes d6. And black not only is a pawn down, but now he's left with this isolated pawn. There's zero compensation. Or as we like to say, white's up a pawn and white has the compensation. So black has to play the move f6, also quite ugly. ef6, sorry, not gf6, but of course knight f6. And black can try some stuff with the f file getting open, like bishop e7 and castle. But if white knows what to do here and how to position the pieces, this is just crap. I mean, white can play e3, then get the bishop out and get the knight out. Quite intuitive here. So the computer evaluates this as like plus 1.70, which is a very, very big advantage, even for an unsound gambit. Okay, but of course the juicy line is queen e7. The juicy line is queen e7. Now, looking at reference, there's over 1,000 games here. This is extremely well studied. This was first played, amazingly, in a game by Alexander Alekhine. Alekhine was white. He was giving a simul in, I think, Indonesia. Where's Surabaya? Where's Surabaya? Surprised Alekhine made it to Indonesia. Is that... Wow, that's pretty cool. Indonesia. So Alekhine had this in a simul in Indonesia in 1933 against some guy named Dinger. And then the second time that this occurred was also in 1933 by none other than Paul Keres. Keres played this with black, and it was a young Keres, like a 16-year-old Keres, and he got crushed. And both Alekhine and Keres' opponents, quite amazingly, had the wherewithal to play bishop f4 and go precisely into the main line. So they both played like this and like this, and both of them won. White won both games. Then it was played many, many times by Henry Grubb of 1G4 fame. So a lot of good players, and Englund only played it in like the 1970s. So as usual, these openings often get their names not from the first person who played them, but because of some sort of book that was written or article that was, or maybe Englund played it the most number of times. Now, after bishop b4, and I should point out, there is also the move knight to b4. Yeah, Fritz Englund. It's not like England, it's Fritz Englund. I don't know how to pronounce it. So after knight b4, you have to know white's move, because black is threatening c2. Does anybody know? Yeah, so curious, you're absolutely correct. Knight d4 is key. And some of you may be thinking, but wait a second, what if black plays c5 and tries to dislodge the knight? Now, of course, you're not just going to obediently move the knight from d4. You're going to play the move rook b1. White's already winning. The queen has only one square, a3. And it says a lot that the computer recommends taking on b1. This is how bad things are. Now you go knight to b5, queen a5, a3. This is all very simple. Knight c6, knight c5, and then knight c7. The game is over. So you can see how terrible some of these lines are. But you've got to know knight d4. That's an important move. Bishop b4, rook b1. And the topical line is queen takes c3. Aman even played this in a classical game against my good friend Grandmaster Steven Zierk in a tournament in St. Louis and made a draw. And the funny thing is that at first sight, this line does not look that bad for black. Because, you know, black has two pieces for a rook and a couple of pawns, and, you know, that bishop seems to be very active. Now, there are 5 games in my database with knight takes e5, which loses very, very quickly. The problem with knight takes e5 is that this bishop on c3, while it looks to be strong, is actually very vulnerable. Who can tell me how we can target this bishop using the resources at our disposal? White has a series of very nice moves here. So we start with rook b3, good job. And after bishop to a5, we continue on with a really sexy move, queen shifts on over to a1, attacking the undefended knight. Now, if black plays knight c4, then we simply take on g7. We don't give a damn about that knight because we're going to win that rook and win the game. And if black plays d6, then we hunt down the bishop with rook to b5. We're basically trying to get black to take on d2. The more, all trades are obviously favorable for white. And if black plays b6, then we simply sacrifice on a5 and follow up with what crushing move here? Yeah, I read your mind, Ivan. f4, get out of there, Mr. Knight. Knight g6, queen takes g7. Look at this. This is a crushing position. White is up a queen and also crushing. So this is game over. And so knight e5 loses essentially on the spot. Aman's move is bishop takes e5. This is, relatively speaking, better. And what you have to know if you reach this position is that white needs to push the e-pawn. And Steven... Okay, so Steven played one of the possible moves. You can play e3 and you can play e4. According to my analysis, e3 is the best move. That is what Steven played. Aman responded with the very natural knight to f6. This is Zurich Hamilton, St. Louis, 2019. And here Steven started to go wrong. He played a very natural developing move, bishop to b5. But somehow, which is still completely winning. Oh, no. Zurich beat Hamilton. Sorry. My bad. They played 2 games in this line. In 2018, they drew. In 2019, Zurich actually won. So Steven improved on this. But the funny thing is that there is an even stronger move in this position, which I think basically wins the game on the spot. And that is a computer-generated novelty. The move g4. Basically trying to push g5 and put black out of commission right off the bat. The secondary purpose of this move is to prepare the fianchetto of the bishop to g2. I think this move basically wins the game on the spot. It's +4 according to the computer. If black delays the pawn with h6, you simply go bishop g2, then knight comes out to c4, you go h3. White is up a queen. Black has not enough compensation. The rook is delaying the development of black's bishop. So this is clearly insufficient comp for the queen. And that is my analysis. So there is not much else to really talk about in queen takes c3. Queen to a3 is, relatively speaking, a better move than queen takes c3, I think. Queen a3 is, relatively speaking, a better move, but it doesn't solve any of the problems in black's position. Black is still completely lost. Knight d5 was our move. We can also play rook b3. So knight d5. And the move bishop takes d2 check. Okay, so queen a5, of course, blunders the piece, and there's nothing left to analyze after that. Relatively speaking, the best line, and this will show you how ugly it is taking. King d8. You have no other way to defend the pawn. You have no other way to defend the pawn. And what's very important to understand in such positions, right? You turn on the computer, and you see ±3. It's +3 or +3.5. And you might be looking at this position and saying, okay, I get that white is attacking, but is it really that winning? And the answer to that is yes, but not because, and this is an important point, not because there's necessarily a forced win or some sequence of moves where, you may boom, 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 and white is winning on the spot. It's just the fact that black is so paralyzed and the attack in the long run is so overwhelming that if white can play patiently and bring all of his pieces out, then black is eventually going to be completely lost. It's a matter of time before black's position collapses, but the thing to understand is that there is no forced win. You just got to play patiently. Now, what does it mean to play patiently in a position like this? How should white develop his pieces, their pieces? Why e3, but why so timid? If you're already pushing the e-pawn, I want the full shebang. I want the full 9 yards, play e4. At this point, there are 4 games in the database. Now, okay, but Levy was trolling. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, wait a second, queen takes a2, why are we giving up a pawn? Do I look like I care about pawns in a position like this, with a knight that is this dominant, a king that is this weak, a center that is this superior? The answer is no, we just play rook d1. If black attempts to trade queens with queen a5, then we refuse the trade with c3. This is some correspondence game from 2012. Our next moves are either going to be queen g5, which is already a huge threat, or we're simply going to go bishop c4 castles, and we're going to crash through along the d file. Look at the center, look at white's pieces, the game is over. For instance, I analyzed knight g7, and now the queen swoops into g5, pinning the knight. Rook to g8 is the most sensible moves, defending pawn on g7, and now perhaps the most instructive move of the attack. Now, you ready, guys? This is going to be an insane sacrifice. I mean, you just got to make sure your seatbelts are fastened, you're sitting on your chair. This is going to be the most insane move of all time. Wait for it. Bishop b2. I was trolling. That's precisely the point here, is you simply develop your pieces, and black is so paralyzed that there's nothing he can do against white completing their development and then playing like rook d2, rook fd1, and basically winning the game. Yeah, exactly. The insanity of this move is hard to comprehend. So if h6, then queen h4. There's no way to dislodge the queen, because if you go g5, then you drop the pawn on h6. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't expect people to see exactly how the game is going to end. I don't know how the game is going to end. But what you need to understand is that white has an unlimited amount of time due to the paralysis that black is experiencing. White has an unlimited amount of time to bring all of the rest of the pieces into the game. This is something a lot of players, I think, have a hard time understanding, because when they see a computer evaluating the position as winning, they think, well, there must be something by force. There must be some sacrifice or some mating combination. But that's not always the case. It could just be winning because one side is paralyzed and the other has, in the long run, a crushing attack. Okay? Well, the knight gets unstuck, but it doesn't matter because you're taking all of black's pawns. I mean, by all means, be my guest. You know, take here and give me this pawn center. So it's so active and it's crushing. There is also the move rook to b3 here. That is an alternative, and this also leads to a winning position for white. And it does so in a very similar manner. Rook b3, and now you simply play e4. I think this is a tiny bit less convincing, because at least black gets a chance to develop some pieces. But now there's an amazing move, bishop to b5. There's an amazing move, bishop to b5. This has only been played in one game. And the idea is that after a6, to chase away the bishop, you respond with a3. Okay, so you might be like, but wait a second, why not go a3 in this position? Why is bishop b5 necessary? The reason is because after bishop takes c3, black has the move queen to a4, where the queen is at least parked on a nice square and attacking e4. So you play bishop b5 much like we played queen c1 in the game, to deprive the queen preliminarily of its key escape square on a4. Then, after a6, we counterattack the bishop with a3. This, of course, relies on some tactics in order to work. So the whole point of this is that if black now plays bishop c3, notice how this bishop stops the queen from coming out to a4. If black plays a takes b5, which happened in the game that this occurred in, then after a takes b4, look at how terrible the queen is going to be. You can't take this pawn because of the pin. Black dropped the queen to a6, and after castles, black was completely lost. And black won the game somehow. Castles, and black is totally paralyzed. In fact, the computer indicates an insane move, bishop back to c1, in order to prevent black from liberating his position with d6. And there's a million attacking ideas here. Knight d5 is coming. This is +5. Black is completely and utterly paralyzed. Okay, both players were 2000, so white made some mistakes a little bit later. In the game, white played queen to e2, which is already very inaccurate. So this is Goter against Biro, World Senior Championship, Bucharest 2019. So I'm very impressed at how white has played so far. But queen e2 is a big mistake, because what does it allow black to do? What does it allow black to do? And after black's next move, black is already okay. Black was 21-47. Yeah, so black liberates the position with d6. I think white was too transfixed on taking this pawn without realizing... White missed the forest for the trees, because now the bishop is coming out to g4. And so the move bishop c1 is an incredible prophylactic move. But this also threatens rook a3, which essentially wins the rook. So that would have been the most precise winning move. But that's why I think rook b3 is a little bit less convincing. I much prefer the move knight d5. And so that's a little bit of an expose in the Englund. Our opponent played queen a5 and blundered the bishop, which wins the game immediately. Thank you, Lily Karinze, for the raid on the party of 72. I really appreciate it. 1 second. Yeah, I hope that this isn't too technical. I know that some of you don't play 1d4. And welcome, guys. We're finishing up a speedrun. Thank you, Lily. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is just completely losing. Queen a2, e4, developing, covering the e6 square, covering the b2 square. Look at how our pieces are cooperating, and then we trap the queen. He resigned. Could you have feed to the light squared bishop here? Yeah, that's possible. Thank you for the 500, Godnug. Any questions about this game? Now, this is how the game actually ended. Can black play bishop a5 instead of trading bishops? Yes, so bishop a5 is possible. Bishop a5 is definitely possible. But then again, white just plays... Oh, the move that I have is rook to b5. Yeah, this is a good move, because this threatens bishop takes a5 and knight takes c7, and essentially forces the same type of position as we just looked at. So rook b5 takes, and if king to d8, then again, you just play e4. It doesn't really matter where the rook is. The rook could always drop back down to b3 in case of necessity. And so, in conclusion, I highly advise against the Englund. I think the Englund, if you want to play offbeat openings, there are many offbeat openings that are much better than the Englund, that are more reputable, that allow you to experience a wider range of positions. You know, some of them, there's the Budapest Gambit, which does rely on white playing the main line. That's e5. You could play many different offbeat lines with d5. You've seen me play the Baltic, teach this to Hafu, the Chigorin. You can play the Alban counter gambit with e5. All of these are far more reputable than the Englund. And you always have to strike a balance. If you want to play offbeat openings, that's fine. But what you don't want to do is play an opening where if your opponent knows what to do, you're basically just totally lost. You want to find something that exposes you to different types of positions, not something which is so gimmicky that it only works against one type of sequence. Well, I did play knight f3. That's what happened. I hope I'm not stepping on... I hope nobody's... Wait, what do you mean, Artibir? How is it equal material? It's a pawn sacrifice. I mean, didn't we just sort of... in which line are you surprised that it's +2/+3? Yeah, I hope nobody seriously recommends the Englund, because I don't know. In my opinion, it's just not tenable. Okay, but I think Levy's probably trolling. I don't anticipate. Well, Artibir, as I explained here, the badness of the Englund is that it gives white a tremendous development advantage. And the king is chronically weak. This is why the Englund is bad. The lines that I just showed, this is the main line of the Englund. And as you could see, I hope I did a halfway decent job of explaining why white's attack in that line is so overwhelming. But I don't recommend it even for beginners. Again, when I recommend something, what's up, Valentinian? When I recommend something or advise against something, I'm certainly not trying to diss anybody who does recommend it. You make your own choices. You find what works for you. You totally find what works for you, and I want to make that super clear. I can only, tell stuff from the bottom of my heart. I mean, I'm just being honest about what I think people should consider playing if you want to improve as quickly as possible. But if there's other people who do recommend it, my motivation here is not to, you know, not to diss them or to suggest that I know better. There is no right or wrong approach here. Everybody has their own path. Okay.